All right. My favorite mic. Okay. Can we have the first slide? Oh, we don't need that one. We need the content. Ah, okay, we'll come back to the folks here. Start with my cartoon. This is one of my favorite New Yorker cartoon. I don't know if you can read that, but it says, we'll feel pretty silly if it's downgraded to a tropical storm. So it sums up for me emergency preparedness. And that is, we need information, and we need timely information and accurate information. The second portion of that, why I love that slide so much, it points out that emergency preparedness has been around for a long time, thousands of years. So what's new? We've done it all before. Like, what's the big deal, right? So I'm going to talk about the changes in the information, in the data, the risk data specifically. So I want to frame up a little bit about the data and the future of the data, just to get an introduction to the discussion later on. So first, Risk 101, for those people who are taking the CEUs, you're going to be a quiz afterwards. Just kidding. So basically, risk is hazard plus vulnerability plus exposure, right? Pretty simple, but just for reviews. Hazard, if you have a building, hazard is the force that building faces. Vulnerability is if that building will stand, and exposure is what's in the building. It's a simple way to put it. But you'd be amazed of how many people get those terms wrong, even in a policy coming out of Washington. And that's not from the current administration. Okay, so the disaster cycle there, that's pretty straightforward, traditional slide. It shows how it goes from a event to respond, phase, recovery, and mitigation and preparedness. And throughout each one of those segments of the cycle, we learn something. And when we learn something, that puts it back into the data that goes around the cycle again. So we're continuing to learn something. Again, what's new? Back 35 years ago, I worked in the field of earthquakes. And in earthquake, we had data for 300 years. For climate, we have 30. Hurricane Andrew, 1992. So we're learning. We're flying, we're flying blind in a way, right? But engineers don't want to say that. But that's important to recognize, that the data is getting better, and we have to understand that. Okay, what does that mean? What's new? There's a big thing that happened last year. All the decades of work from the climate scientists has accumulated in a full array of data, complete data. Now, it needs to be, updated over time, but it is a complete suite of data. So what that means is that every single location in the continental U.S., there is a magnitude and a probability for an event 30 years from now. That's magnificent. So here's an example. The top graphic is from NOAA's website on sea level rise. The bottom two is from First Street Foundation mapping flooding and heat events 30 years from now. Okay. What that does is that it allows us to compare in a quantitative way across a whole different range of geography and whole different hazards. So now we're able to put forth priorities that are actually measurable. Okay. The problem is that we don't have vulnerability data yet. That's what we're working on. And engineers, architects, myself, we're working on that. Okay. But the point is, more precise data is coming. So now I'm going to give you a sneak preview of what's to come. Okay, so this is a pretty boring slide. But I want to show you a pilot project we, GFT, had done for the federal government. We've been working for the federal government since Sandy, a lot of reconstruction projects. We have a lot of experience doing reconstruction. And we're supporting planning for them, for the Air Force, for Department of Homeland Security. This particular example is for an agency within Homeland Security. I'm not at liberty to say which agency or the location. But it is an example of how this data is being put forth. what you see on screen is the result of a rapid climate assessment we did for a base, well, I should say campus. And the campus has about 100 buildings and bridges and roads and so forth. So in reality, this spreadsheet goes out to the right about 5 more pages. Okay, each one of those columns is a building. So what we did was we rate each one of the buildings against the hazards. The rows are hazards. You said, well, that's too many rows. Well, so the major ones are there. There's flood, fire, heat, and so forth. But hazards plays out different ways. So, for example, volcanoes. Okay, volcanoes can get you in 3 ways. You can have an eruption, you can have a lava flow, you can have ash cloud. So there's 3 lines. Okay, so when we do this hazard by hazard, we give it a rating. The gray means, okay, they don't exist. They're not relevant for the site. Green means everything's okay. Red means you're completely destroyed. Okay, so there's 3 reasons why we did this pilot. One is to can we really make prioritization across a whole enterprise using this? Answer is yes. We have 1% event or 100-year event. That could be a fire, it could be a heat, but it's comparable. We can take action based on that. So the second is, can we do this fast and cost effectively? Yes, we did this matter of days, not months, days or weeks, okay, but not months. And third question is, how does this data reside? And this is what the relevance of this panel is. How does this information reside? So we piloted specifically to allow this information to be kept in their asset management system. So now you have a vulnerability attached, a system that you could reach back to and access. So how many people drive fancy car in this? Well, this is New York City. Nobody drives fancy cars. So, okay. So in these fancy cars, they have these little chips. So if we go get an oil change, it registers. So that's what asset management system is. So if you did some repair on this building that had a vulnerability, you don't need to do the assessment again. So all of this is things are changing. The data is not going to come in forms of maps anymore. It's going to come in forms of a database. And that would impact how we use that information and all the good works that you folks are doing. So I will shut up and hand it back to you. Thank you.
I think I'm on. So I was volunteered by my fellow panelists. I think it was called Voluntold, that I was going to be the moderator today. So I actually just want to step back just a minute, because I do want everybody on the panel to actually give a short introduction so you know who they are and where they're coming from before we start talking. And I will start. Keith Adams. I'm Executive Director of New Jersey. In case you're not familiar, if you look right over there behind that green woman in the harbor, that's us. If you're geographically challenged. But we're a nonprofit support organization in New Jersey. We're part of a national network. Perhaps you've heard of National VOAD, which stands for Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. You have a chapter here in New York City, and also in New York State, as well as 56 states and territories have these as well. Represent organizations anywhere from American Red Cross to Islamic Relief to the Jewish Federation to lots and lots of people in between, over 100 members and partners. And we work primarily on assisting community organizations to build resilience. So we used to be a lot about response, and now, as you can see, the data and what we're experiencing it is more about prep. It is about advocating for mitigation. So as I tell people, they say, "You're the disaster guy." And I say, no, I am a community organizer with a focus on disaster. So at this point, Ella?
Hello, Butler. I'm alias Reddy. You guys can hear me, right? I don't know.
The mic. I know. Pesky mics.
Can you hear me now? Okay. LES Ready is a coalition, a mutual aid coalition, not a 501c3, not a standalone organization, a mutual aid coalition that has about 30 to 40 organizations, churches, community gardens, all sorts of community groups that work together collaboratively to prepare and respond to disasters in the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Cornell. I work for New York City Emergency Management as part of the community engagement team. And specifically, I work on community preparedness. So I have a lot of community partners in the room. Happy to say that, from all over the city. Woo-hoo. And what we do is help networks and coalitions organize themselves with some specific tools or resources that we've developed over the years to prepare for emergencies. And so we sort of built it coming after Hurricane Sandy, where so many of our communities were just devastated. And we saw that there was help, but we also saw the need for hyper-local networks. So more on that later.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sam Sklar. I work for a transportation consulting firm called Systematica, founded in Milan, Italy in 1989, but we've recentered some of our operations here to New York, and I help lead our New York office. We do mobility planning, transportation engineering. A lot of our work focuses on resiliency efforts at ports and for some landside work on maritime projects. But we worked in markets around the world where water emergencies, sun emergencies, and other environmental emergencies are becoming more and more important to mitigate for, and to be able to communicate with people who interact with our systems to be able to plan for challenges like an evacuation, and making sure that the community is resilient in those conditions. So really excited to be on this panel. I know a transportation planner may not be the first person you'd think to be on here, but there's lots of really good takeaways and excited to share with you today.
And hello again. My name is Kid Wong, with principal with GFT. We're a nationwide AE, architecture and engineering firm, and I'm the resiliency person there.
Thanks.
So we have several questions here. And the first question is, why is effective communication in court and in emergency preparedness? I think that's what I would call a very obvious question, or at least the answer should be to that. But so more description here, and I am going to start with Sam on this question, and that is, how can planners and designers ensure that they are providing the necessary information to communities?
So thanks, Keith. So this is a really important question, and I think it's relatively obvious we should say it, that seconds save lives. In an emergency situation, the better prepared a community might be, and we can define community how we want. That's either a neighborhood, that's a block, that's up to a borough, or even the whole city, that if we can cut off a couple seconds from folks being able to evacuate a space by better planning, and we'll get into what that means in a few minutes, then we can really do a great job of ensuring minimal loss of life, minimal property damage, and ensuring that our systems are able to bounce back more quickly. I will say that, it's a really interesting idea here that planning is in advance and it's continuous. So 18, 24, 36 months before a potential disaster, and to Kit's point, we now have more precise information about when likelihoods are going to be for a certain climate emergency, a weather event, or a storm surge, and we can better focus our energies on targeting, making sure that we're building resilient communities well in advance. The timeframes may be different, so an emergency might be right now, but planning in advance, we can do a better job of coordinating as planners, as a field, as a discipline, with different types of partners in the space, like our emergency preparedness partners.
Thanks, Sam. So looking at this, one of the things that we wanted to explore, you heard Kim talk a lot about the engineering. But there's also a human element, right, that we all know, in how we are actually communicating down to the community level. So, Jill, I'm going to call on you. What are some of the things here in New York City that we're doing to actually reach down to those folks in the neighborhood? That hyper-local approach is you.
The hyper-local approach. Thank you so much for that. So one of the things that we do, obviously, most of you live in New York, know about Notify NYC. That's our free emergency alert system. But what we found by working our Strengthening Communities program, which was stood up in 2020 with money from the BRIC program from the feds, is that our hyper-local networks take the information that we give them and give it a community framework. And it could be language expertise. We have folks who are fluent in Korean, and they use a Korean messaging app called Kakao Talk, and they will shorten our message, and they will make sure that idiomatically it means something to the people receiving it. If you go to the Lower East Side, you're always going to want to, when you can, message in Spanish and Chinese at the minimum, right? We have other coastal communities that use the tide charts and interpret the data referencing the last flood. Hamilton Beach, for those of you who know that neighborhood. So that's what Roger Gendron does if you know Hamilton Beach Civic. So we have these examples all over. And so for me, the magic happens on that hyperlocal level, that what we do, it's a springboard for what our community networks can accomplish this message.
Thanks, Joe. So I guess I'm the only representative here from New Jersey, so I guess I will talk about what we're doing. And of course, completely something different than what Jill's doing in New York, just because we're New Jersey. No, not really. We're doing exactly the same things. Certainly, we found coming out of Sandy recovery and other disasters that we've had, and basically most of our disasters are very localized. They're either urban flooding or they're riverine flooding, and we have probably 100 of them a year. And we had big fires recently too, so which really weren't much of a challenge. But that being said, it is about how do we kind of turn this information down to the very local level. So you all live in a neighborhood.
Sure.
Okay. So if I came to your neighborhood, do you think I would be the expert for your neighborhood? So understand, I've got all kinds of knowledge about disaster response, and I've got all these things, and that I've been doing over the years, almost my 40-some year career. So I'm the expert, and you're telling me that you know more about your neighborhood than I do. And you know what? I 100% agree with you. 100%. So exactly. You know where the vulnerable folks are in your neighborhood. You know where the resources are in your neighborhood. I used to do a class or a presentation on what we use in New Jersey as our kind of guidance on how we reach out to the communities. It was, who are the people in your neighborhood? Any of you remember like Sesame Street that I think is now banned, especially in Iraq? But anyway, they used to sing the song, who are the people in your neighborhood, right? And I made that kind of the presentation. That really illustrates that your neighborhood, you're the experts in your neighborhood. You know who to go to. You know who to trust. You've built relationships. Well, that's this thing that FEMA calls whole of community. You may have heard of that. They talk a lot about it. Sometimes they're good at it. Sometimes not so good. But we use kind of the same thing. It's called asset-based community development. And what it says is that each neighborhood, each community gets to define themselves. They have assets. They probably have all the assets that they need to deal with a particular problem that's going to come in their neighborhood. They might not have all the resources, but they would have those relationships. And key to those relationships are they need a connector. So who's the connector? Well, the connector may be the civic association or a neighborhood association, but somebody to introduce. Because here's the real deal. When that major disruptive event comes, that disaster in your community, something that's up there on Kim's chart, it's not up there anymore, but you got it. And that is, where are you going to find those resources? So think about this. When that disruptive event happens, there's going to be more people with food insecurity. So where are your people that have a passion for feeding people and they do it every day? So what do you do with that? You had 100 people coming to your pantry or your soup kitchen every day. What happens when now there's 300, 400 of them? Do you know who else is feeding people? Do you have good contacts with, say, the food bank to get more supplies? Do you have a way, alternate kitchen space? Do you have a local restaurant that you know the owner? And the same thing works with housing insecurity, economic, racial, and environmental injustice, right? So it is about who are the people in your neighborhood. And I think that that's what it's really important, is to look how we can take this data and actually empower the experts that we have in our neighborhoods. So instead of any of us coming to your neighborhood and saying, get out of the way, this is a disaster, I'm in charge, this is how you do it, like we could anyway, because we don't have this amount of resources. But it's about you having a conversation and looking at us as a resource that can help you. So, and before, right, we try to be the connector and hook people up. But then afterwards, that gives us a rich network. So now the conversation is, what do you need? What are you lacking? Do you need volunteers? Do you need extra food? Do you need whatever? So that's kind of what this is. It also builds a network for advocacy, right? Because we know that we only get what we screen for and what we advocate. So that's kind of our approach in New Jersey. And I would like to tell you that we have all of our 565 communities well organized and resilient, but it's very much a work in process. Sam, I'm going to throw it over to you because I know you have some international experience with this. Could you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, I brought some slides. So my company works all over the world, but our focus is in Europe and in the Middle East for the most part. It has been in the past, at least, and we're working on more projects in the U.S. But for folks in the room who are trained in planning, transportation planning, this is called an isochrone map. And what it's doing is it's measuring how many locations can you reach within a certain amount of time. And we often use this for economic mobility, for viability, accessibility. But one of the ways that we can use it in the future, or I'm sure places are doing this, but one of the ways we can enhance is disaster routing for escape purposes. So let's say you start at a big building or your home in your neighborhood. We can use it as planners to understand how to build inclusive wayfinding and how we can build routes to be able to get out of a city to a point of higher level or a gathering point that's sort of known to the community. And I'll echo Joe and Keith's points here that the community knows best what their local maybe resource gathering point might be, but we'll work with the different partners involved who have a very deep care for these types of things. So this type of mapping can be done at the city level, it can be done at the local level, and it can really gather, I guess, ideas around the idea of where you're starting and what the fastest way to get to the safe points might be based on the network that you have. The second one was a project that we worked on in Dubai, and I don't know if folks have been to Dubai before, but it's a pretty car-oriented city, much like New York has been since the 1940s or so. And so what this is measuring is connectivity by. Can we possible to stop that? Uh-oh. Am I letting you do this, or am I doing this?
I'm actually doing it from under.
Okay, so this is measuring connectivity by distance traveled, and so often we'll use the heuristics for distance traveled. So on the left, I'm sure it'll go back eventually. On the left is 350 meters, which is about half a mile or so, and these are the amount of places that you can.
Ella, stop that.
This is the connectivity from a pedestrian perspective. In the middle by micromobility or bike perspective, and on the right, I'm sure it'll come back, the car perspective. So what this shows is the permeability of the network and the connectivity of the network for Dubai in particular was particularly designed for car travel. And obviously, in an extreme weather event, car travel may not be possible for lots of reasons. Either the car might be underwater, or the safe point might be not reachable by car for whatever reason. So the idea is that we can use transportation planning tools. And I know Kit was talking about the death of the map and the move toward the database, but there's still a way to use the spatial data to help display and analyze the types of networks that we need to build so that we can ensure a resilient community in case of a disaster here. So what we're seeing on the left is obviously the brighter the line, the more connected the network. And what we're seeing are little pockets on the left. So these might be great for micro neighborhoods at a block level. But if your evacuation point, it lays outside the walkability parameter here, it might be very, very challenging for you to get to where you need to go by foot. And I think this is an important mapping and analysis tool that we can bring to our communities as part of a regular planning process going forward. And building in the idea of emergency preparedness to our streets plan, per se. I was taking a look this morning to make sure I wasn't speaking out of turn about that. And I did see, of course, sustainability and resiliency. And I'm sure there are a ton of people working in our public sector in New York to help think about the future of emergency preparedness and planning in that way. It would really be great to see in the next iteration how we can use our transportation planning tools in our streets. And that includes the planning of our streets for use, but also the wayfinding and inclusivity that way to make our streets stronger, not just from an accessibility and economic prosperity perspective, but from a disaster preparedness and evacuation perspective as well. Thanks, Theo.
Keith's going to add a point.
Sure, go ahead.
That just reminded
Just
me.
jump in.
Yeah, thank you. We did a plan for an Air Force base, and we have the similar issue about how to get people moving, evacuating. And we realized that we had a traffic model on that base. So we have a traffic model, we had a flood model. When we put them together, we know which street was going to be closed, and we know how to plan the emergency route around them. So that's something that is common, right? It's absolutely merging all those things are information that is very useful to the community to send.
Thank you. So one last point on that. This is not necessarily the thing you would show your community. You wouldn't go to the community and show them a map, but this is the way there's a next step here about how you can build the ideas learned from maps like this and from the isochrone map that I showed you about from Amsterdam into your community engagement processes. So you can go to a community and do a lot of deep listening, because like we talked about, we're the experts potentially in solutions, but we don't know your problems. So that's really important to understand. But it's what are the takeaways from this? How can this be devolved into really cogent talking points and get that and build that problem statement with our community, knowing that these are the types of information that are available with the information that we have now.
Yeah, I mean, we had some experience with that in New Jersey in terms of we actually partnered, my organization, with Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. And they had developed a tool that basically assessed communities' resilience. If you know, I always laugh because people say, how do you define resilience? Well, for us, it's like how strong is the social fabric in a particular community to support itself during a disaster. So what we found is a couple things. One, information was great, right? So this took Alice data, it took engineering data, all the things that we're talking about, the information that were given, and scoring. But then it also involved community meetings and going out with stakeholders and actually talking to them. And I will tell you the data was great. It was great to educate them. They had a score at the end. They could say, my community is more resilient than yours. So there. Okay. But really that wasn't, and some people, they like that, right? They like that competitiveness. But the important thing was using the data to begin a conversation with folks, those local experts, those folks in the community, those stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, okay, to have the communication fostering around that, raising awareness, making relationships, putting out points of collaboration. That's what we thought was most important. So I used to get told when I started in this business a long time ago is that in disaster, information is king. And that is true. What it means is, he or she that has the most information, they're the ones best prepared to hit the ground running. And we do see that. So in my business, I always say it's relational, right? It's about the relationships that we make, the understanding that, again, we don't know everything as an individual, but collectively we know a heck of a lot. So I'm going to just community engagement strategies that kind of we've used, I've described, but maybe Ella, could you talk about how you have the Lower East Side all organized and buttoned up now? She used her clicker, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess LES Ready is the hyper local. We're sort of the coalition that everyone's talking about. We are a member of the Strengthening Community Coalition. Is the reason why I said yes to this panel, because I love talking to Jill. Right? NISM has been really great, especially the Strengthening Communities program, in working with the coalitions. When I started with them about 2 years ago, they weren't that great at communications. City governments, planners, they have best practices. And if you know the Lower East Side, or you don't know the Lower East Side, we have our own best practices. And that's how we communicate, and that's how we work together. And, about a year and a half later now, when Strengthening Communities comes to us and talks about, let's work on communication, let's have a drill, let's have it. And of course, we melt down and go, I can't do that. And how are we going to do that? And they say, no, just do what you're doing and teach us. And so we learn how they communicate. They learn how we communicate. And it's been a great partnership. LES Ready is probably the most acrimonious coalition. There's about 147,000 people on the Lower East Side. About 45% of them speak a language other than English. 30,000 of those people live in public housing. We have the most NYCHA projects buildings in all of New York City in the Lower East Side. And it's a very tight-knit community who knows how to take care of each other. The coalition started after Sandy in 2012 because nobody came. And they're still doing that same work today. As far as building transportation and infrastructure projects, the coalition, the community members, Miss English over at the NYCHA TA building, they will ruin all of your projects if you don't come to them first. So we don't see the neighborhood and the community as the last person you should ask. We see the neighborhood and the community as the first person you should ask. Last year there was a Department of Transportation sort of design that they wanted to put through in the Lower East Side, and they came to us with 3 options. You have option 1, option 2, option 3, and they said, "Oh, we talk to people. And the Lower East Side people talk to people too. They talk to each other. And they said, "Who did you ask?" "We asked these people." "Well, you didn't ask those people, and those people, and those people, and those people." And so we demanded community meetings for all of the people to be engaged. And if you just ask people, like, we're going to get rid of these sidewalks and we're going to put in trees because we need more green space because we redone the East River Parkway, and now the people who want trees want trees. Great. But you're blocking off emergency access to buildings where, Miss English can't get out of her building in a wheelchair to get to the bus, to the thing. And the Lower East Side is a community that it's an all of us or none of us. So, and we won't back your plans if you don't consider preparedness and resiliency and response to the entire community and all of the people, languages, and disabilities and access that involves. So, I encourage you to start with community coalitions and community organizations, and not just the ones that are accessible to you or that are friendly to you or that are easy to work with. There's a difference between nonprofit 501c3s and mutual aid organizations. A 501c3 is somebody you can, pay to play. They're self-supporting. I love a nonprofit organization. I'll get that wrong.
Thank you. I thought you were
No, I love
throwing shade here.
No, I love a nonprofit organization, but and LES Ready has fought really hard, I think, to stay a coalition, a mutual aid group, because none of the organizations or TA groups or community gardens run the coalition. I am the only employee part-time. Everyone else is a volunteer. They all volunteer their time. And does it take longer for you to get community meetings with all of us and get questions answered? Jill, kind of 8 times a week, I go, "Did I ask you about this?" You say, "Yeah, I sent you 3 emails." "Okay, great." Does it take longer? Yeah, but it's important that you address all the needs of communities before you start to plan
Thanks, Ellen. Anything to add? Anybody? Our time's getting a little short here. We worried when we had the pre-meeting, right, if we were going to be able to fill the space. No, it hasn't been a problem. So, Sam, you got something to add?
I do. Ella, you bring up a really amazing point about engaging the community as soon as you have an idea from a transportation department perspective. A lot of things in transportation planning are counterintuitive in a lot of ways. The most cogent one, I think, is widening a highway does not actually save time. It actually can make the problem worse. I bring that up as an example for an old colleague of mine who used to run Washington State's DOT would say, the thing you don't do is come to a community meeting, which is often held somewhere that's inaccessible at a time a lot of folks can't necessarily get to, and don't come with design, display, deliver ideas without having, again, developed a problem statement way, way, way early. That's the quickest way. It's the most volatile time of a project or an idea because it's the quickest way to get support, or it's the quickest way to get people to rally against you. And it's a lot harder to build back from negative than it is to build from neutral.
And don't come without funding because we need babysitters and
Also true.
transportation.
Yeah, and I think that's, going back to what I said about who are the experts in your neighborhood, right, is that oftentimes the pattern has been both in government, and I'll take the heat as a nonprofit, is we hire consultants, right? And what are consultants paid to do? They're paid to come in and define a problem and then sell you an answer. And most times what you already want to hear, oftentimes not in that context with the community. And it never, ever ends well. So
that shrapnel hit me all the way over here.
Yeah, I see. Well, Elle was picking on me now.
I worked with thousands of nonprofits over my career, starting with the UN, and there's 100. And
this is sort of at the UN up here. I feel like I'm moderating at the UN right now. But anyway, that being said.
I was just saying there's something to be said for...
Okay, we've only got about 1 minute left, and I am going to take some questions. Do I have time for just a couple of questions? Okay, good. So, to me, what this should come is communication, right, is on very many levels. It is about the information. It is about the engineering, but it's also about how we tie that together, all these resources that we have here in the New York City region together so that you're actually reaching down to the neighborhood level and you have good buy-in and people understand. And also people have a better understanding of the problems at the very local level than we certainly do from wherever we're sitting. So communication is essential, and I think that's where we started. So any questions from anyone, comments? We're going to start right here. Oh, you got to get a mic here. Let me give you mine. Oh, of course I want to give you a mic. You got important things to say, and I want to make sure the back of the room hears you.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Loretta Humphrey, and I live in Southeast Queens, and I am the president and founder of the Greater Triangle Civic Association. I also am partnered with Scourge, who is an environmental justice coalition, and we partner with Jill. And we're going to partner with you. Now, I love
their queens right after this.
Right? I loved everything that you said, but I think that there were, if I may say so, one component that was missing is very important, and that was the mental health of people going into all these disasters and things, because sometimes people panic in the disaster and you delete
that mental health concern. That's all of us.
All of us. Wow. Yes. So that's the component that I only thing that I saw that was missing.
Mm-hmm. Raise I get boss. Find an expert.
Hi, so I work in sustainability consulting, and one thing I'm wondering is for the designers, for the planners, for the people who might be trained in the design, display, deliver mentality, how do you get in, or what have you seen in your experiences, how to get the right people from the neighborhoods in the room and pre-design when you know that the systems in place are often scheduling inconvenient meetings at the wrong times and only the NIMBYs show up often to a lot of meetings sometimes, and not everyone who's representative of real community needs can make it. What can people on the design, consulting, development side do to better reach the right people?
Sam, I know you're itching to date this.
Yeah, I have two big comments about this. It's start early and often. It takes a personality, I think, to convince their boss's boss that it's worth going to a community and spending non-deliverable hours just meeting with folks where they are. That might be community centers, that might be local hangouts, that might be a park, that might be businesses. Really, you got to take time, and you really got to have no fear and to develop that relationship, which does take time. The quickest way, again, to community trust is by showing people that you care and showing up. Second thing is, I'll cite an example from a really amazing planner. Maybe you've heard of her book, Inclusive Transportation, Veronica Davis, who used to run Houston Public Works Department. She would hold community meetings for a bus network redesign at the bus stop at 7 o'clock in the morning, meeting people, bus riders where they are, so that it was convenient for them to give feedback, not convenient for you to get feedback. I think we have to change our mentality and really rethink how we do engagement from that perspective. And that stayed with me since she wrote that in her book. As I've talked to her about it, it's been a driving force for my planning practice.
Yeah, I think it's also about finding those connectors in the neighborhood, right? So those groups, like if I wanted to find out something about the Lower East Side right now, I have LES experts in ES, and she may not have all the info, but she's well connected in that year. So that would be the other piece of advice is, again, leverage those relationships. I think you'll prefer.
I think if you ask, the question that we go in and ask when projects are come in and people say, oh, we had 17 community meetings, and like, well, we just found out about you yesterday.
Yeah.
So you didn't talk to anybody I know.
Right.
So I think when you meet with the first one, the question you should continue to ask is, who should we talk to next? Right. And then when you've gone through a couple and you say, did I talk to everyone I need to talk to in this neighborhood? And start there.
Back up. You're over here. Okay. You decide. Here. Come over here.
Yeah, and then
You can pass the mic across.
Thank you, and thanks to all the panelists and moderator for everything you do. I live in Rockaway, the peninsula, not Rockaway, New Jersey. We're coming up on the 13th hurricane season since Sandy. I did not live there during Sandy, but I live and work in Rockaway now. We don't have an evacuation book in Rockaway, and if there is an evacuation plan that exists, we, as in myself as a community member and many other community members, don't have it. I'm just wondering where the communication shortfall is, and I know either city agencies are slammed. I know everyone's super busy, but that just seems like low-hanging fruit that should be addressed.
Sounds like a joke.
It's a Jill question, yes. So you should connect with me, and the short answer for all New Yorkers is that everyone should have an emergency preparedness plan. If you live in a coastal flood zone, you should know your zone, which of course for Rockaway is Zone 1. You should know your evacuation zone. And the plan is that you need to move out of the evacuation zone via public transportation. And the messaging will reflect that, not via a vehicle. So if you follow any of the hurricane evacuations in other states, we haven't really had one, like you mentioned, since Sandy, right? Because Ida came in, and it came in as a flood emergency event, not as a coastal storm, because it wasn't, although it was a post-tropical storm, right? Another designation. And 48 hours, that's when an evacuation will be called subject to the mayor's approval, right? And that's the challenge, is that this message has been delivered. We are happy to come out and deliver it again. We can't say it enough, because we know what the challenges are going to be. If you get in a car and you have the competing cars coming from Nassau and Suffolk County to exit Long Island, it will be a nightmare, rivaling what happens in Key West. So I'm happy to give you invite me out. We have people out. I know. There's unfortunately, the message has been delivered by multiple departments on our team. We work on it both in the Ready New York team, community engagement, and in the government relations team. It's really challenging, and it's very scary to think about evacuating, because as much as you can prepare, when you get that actual call to evacuate, there's really, everything goes out the window. I mean, I've had to evacuate a hurricane, so I don't know what other people here have had. And, you know, you just grab your bag and you go. And I had to,
You can call me. We're all going up to the Upper East Side. So
right, or my house.
Can I just make another comment to that, please? There is also, you can volunteer for your New York CERT
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
area. And the classes are actually starting tonight for the spring. You can also register for the fall cohort. They will train you on how to educate your own neighborhood and to work with your community board on how to communicate about the evacuation plans. The first thing they do is hand you the map of the zones and who to work with, and they train you to work with the first responders and all that. So I really encourage you you can go on Eventbrite and sign up for the classes. There is a background check and you have to verify your residency. But I really encourage everyone to volunteer for NY CERT to learn all about emergency management.
Can you just add to that really quickly that Rockaway, hold on one second. The Rockaways is very similar to the Lower East Side. And Jill says this a lot to me too. Like we went over the plan 700 times, Ella. But the thing is people are busy. People are busy. The communities that we live in, they have so many stressors and so many things that they're dealing with that if I have to walk by them 1,000 times in the street and go, Dapka. So it's an everyday thing. It's something that you just try to remember while you're juggling all of the other horrible, terrible things that are happening in life. And
So, my name is Aristolia Cook, and I'm the president of the 149 South Ozone Bar Civic Association. I'm also the president of the Inwood Street Block Association. I'm also a member of Square Ridge, Southeast Queens Residents Environmental Justice Coalition, and we have been working tirelessly with Jill on our evacuation plan. One thing I did want to say to you, they do have a plan out there in Far Rockaway, and I want to speak afterwards. The Edward Williams, he had started that before he passed away, and also we were working with the People's Police Academy because of the fact that Far Rockaway is its own entity where it didn't have evacuations out, so we would develop in that under him. But one of the things that when a disaster happens, and I've been in numerous disasters, we had to deal with the disaster in my community when we had the sewage backup in 2019. Over 300 homes was in a day of raw sewage. Then we had another situation with Hurricane Ida. Then we had another situation with fires. So when these things happen, especially with a fire, they don't know what to do. And so you had these shark tanks that come in there and prey on the communities. Oh, they take advantage of them. They did it during the sewage backup, the home serve, these companies, we'll do this, we'll do that, and you're signing away things and you're signing on this, and you don't even know what you're doing. And years later now, some of our community members still are paying back loans to these companies because they were not covered by the city as these companies told them, or they weren't covered by their insurance because in our community, because it was sewage backup, that's not under flood. So it's a lot of times, like what you're saying, and like what you're saying is preparedness. Someone has to be in a community to say, hey, don't sign these papers. And so that's what I was telling my neighbor when they had the fire around the court. Don't sign that. Don't sign. And she didn't sign it because this guy said, oh, yeah, I can help out. I can help out. But it's you have to really be there to be able to help your community. And so the plan that we're doing now, which is we're in the cohort 4 with NYSEM. We are very grateful for that. But we can't be prepared enough.
Okay.
We really can. It's not if, it is when it's going to happen. So we do need more of these things. We do need more individuals to be involved. Yeah. But one other thing, and then I'm going to stop. You need to be involved in your precinct council meetings. Out there in Far Rockaway, you had a 100 and 101 precinct council. You need to go to those meetings. You need to go to your community board meetings because this is where things happen. Senator Sanders out there every second Saturday of the month, he has a community core meeting. We talk about what's going on in the communities. So this is where you're able to actually build relationships and know what's going on in your community. Because it, like I said, in Far Rockaway,
I think she's trying to tell you, don't worry, we got you. Yes. We got you.